Hey everyone, this is the Melanated PhD podcast, and I'm your host, Diamond, or Dr. Dime, or soon to be Dr. Dime. And I'm so excited for episode 1 of the Melanated PhD podcast, season 1. And the title of this episode is Let's Start with the Basics, also known as PhD 101. So I wanted to begin with a little bit of my journey of what even got me interested in pursuing a doctorate of philosophy. So first and foremost, a lot of times when people hear that I'm getting a doctorate degree, they assume that that means a medical doctorate. And this is a very easy mistake to make. So there are two categories of doctorates that they're usually separated into. One are the research doctorates, and the other category is the professional doctorates. Professional doctorates are usually those degrees that we would associate with becoming a Juris Doctor, or becoming an attorney, or becoming a psychiatrist, or becoming a doctor of physical therapy. And then the research doctorates, what I am a part of, do just that. We conduct research. So if you want to think of it in the biomedical space, since I'm a biomedical engineer, I help to develop therapeutic strategies or these targets to then translate to a clinician that they can implement, or I guess you could say suggest to their clientele based off of their specific patient profile. So we really develop the therapies, and the clinicians utilize those therapies. So I really love what I do. But before we even get into that, let's go all the way back to the beginning. So I've always been a nerd. I've always been a STEM geek since, I would say, the 5th grade. I was very intrigued with science, mainly mathematics at the time, but when I saw the applications of mathematics in science and the ability to make an impact, that is what really drew me to STEM in general. And STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Sometimes you may hear people call it STEAM, which is the same acronym, but with art in the middle, because I think the right brain and the left brain conversation is really pertinent, because you need both sides to be an optimized individual, in my personal opinion. But nonetheless, when I was in 5th grade, I learned that my grandmother had been diagnosed with breast cancer. And so this was the first time in my academic career or journey, even as an elementary schooler, that I realized that I didn't just want to be an absorber of information, I wanted to generate the information. And what I meant by that is I didn't understand, with all of the science, all of the inventions, all of the discoveries, we put a man on the moon, we've done all these great things, but how are we not able to help people live healthy lives? And so that was when I took it upon myself to ask my 5th grade science grade teacher, Miss Barnes, okay, how do I cure cancer? Where are the materials? How can I get the materials? And how can I make this happen as soon as possible? And she was so gracious, because that day at recess, we literally spent the entire recess while everyone was outside or at lunch or playing, and we went to her desk and we looked up the best bioengineering programs in the country. And so, of course, these were the likes of Georgia Tech and Stanford, and of course, North Carolina A&T State University. And at that point, she let me know that if I wanted to cure cancer, I should probably pursue a career such as biomedical engineering. So I was like, from then on, set my heart on, have to go to college, have to do biomedical engineering. And that was really where I was even introduced to engineering in general, because before then, I thought that engineers were just the people who made cars. And so when I saw that this engineering topic was much broader and more, I guess, relevant to me, that is really where the draw of science came for me. I wasn't just interested in science because of science in of itself, which some people are, and that's great. I was interested in the potential that science represented to help the people's lives around me, and notably the people that I care most about. And so from then on, I decided that I was really going to just hone in on my science and math skills. I remember going to like a Five Below equivalent store and getting a bunch of science experiments and trying to do experiments at home to cure cancer. But that was really a seed. So much so that around this same time in middle school, we had visited the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum. Side note, I'm from Prince George's County, Maryland, the DMV area. So proud PG County, pretty girl county. If you know, you know. Around the same time, we went to the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, and I was learning about how so many of the inventions that were used for space applications ended up being therapeutic advances. And I don't know what it was, but something clicked in my juvenile mind to say, if the cure for cancer is not on Earth, it must be in space. You know, like that was literally my thought process as a middle schooler, right, at this point. And so I remember also telling my dad and my mom at the time that not only am I going to cure cancer, but I'm going to cure cancer in space, since the cure seemingly is not here on Earth. And so from that point on, literally from then to today, my goals or career goals in life have been to, one, cure cancer, and to two, go to space. And so that really set me off on this path. After I graduated from middle school, I was accepted into the Science and Tech program at Eleanor Roosevelt High School in Greenbelt, Maryland. Shout out Raider Nation. And really a large part of the motivation for going to Eleanor Roosevelt is because it was right down the street from NASA Goddard Space Center. So I was really, I guess, drawn by the opportunity to maybe do an internship at NASA Goddard, because part of the internship program at my high school was that in your last year as a senior, you could potentially do an internship at a local corporation or company. And so because I knew that Goddard was so close, I was like, okay, this is my in. Like, this is my in to the astronaut program. And that was really why I chose to go to Eleanor Roosevelt. Fast forward to senior year in high school, I had to start applying for the internships that I would be interested in. And unfortunately, I was not able to apply to the NASA Goddard internship, but instead I ended up doing an internship at the University of Maryland's Environmental Technology Department with Dr. Stephanie Lansing and Dr. Freddie Watarsa, which are, to this day, are just amazing mentors. And I'm just so grateful for how they ushered me into the world of academia. It was Dr. Freddie Watarsa who first told me that I should pursue a PhD. I remember I would spend half of the day at the University of Maryland, and then I would spend half of the day at school for my, of course, high school classes. And we were doing these experiments. And at the time, because it was an environmental science department, my specific project was studying the effect of separation on poultry manure anaerobic digestion. And I always chuckle because people are always asking me, like, what does that even mean? Basically, we were trying to get biogas from chicken poop. And while it was such a messy project because it smelled so bad. And every time we went to the farm, like, it was kind of disgusting. I'm not gonna lie. I learned so much from that experience. I learned to use a gas chromatograph. I learned how to write. I learned how to navigate academic space. And my mentor, or my direct mentor, Dr. Watarsa, told me one day, like, you should pursue a PhD. And I remember telling him that, you know, after I graduate from college, I'm probably going to want to make money at that point, and I don't want to take on more student debt, right? And it's so funny. He looked at me so, like, startled, like, Diamond, nobody pays for STEM PhDs. STEM PhDs are free. And as a 17-year-old, I was like completely blown away, because I was so just shocked that nobody had ever told me that, right? And so that was when I decided, okay, I'm going to do a STEM PhD, and this is going to be my path towards curing cancer with my PhD research. Alongside this, I also was learning that in my journey to becoming an astronaut, one of the requirements was you needed a graduate degree. So in my head, I'm thinking, okay, this is a way to kill two birds with one stone, right? I have to have a graduate degree to be to qualify for the astronaut program. Therefore, I can get this PhD that will allow me to cure cancer, and then that will qualify me for the astronaut program, and then my life is fulfilled. And so after I did that internship at the University of Maryland, and I ended up graduating that summer before I started at North Carolina A&T State University. They invited me to give an invited talk at the American Ecological Engineering Society conference in Knoxville, Tennessee. First of all, I didn't even know that research conferences were a thing or that you could be invited for a talk. But like I said, my mentors at the University of Maryland, Dr. Lansing, Dr. Ratastra, was just superstars. Like, I literally owe so much to them. And so they literally funded me. I remember it was the week of Senior Beach Week. And I sacrificed basically in Senior Beach Week to go to this conference. And that conference changed my life forever. When I was giving my presentation on the effect of separation on poultry manure and anaerobic digestion, there was faculty from Duke, it was faculty from basically all of these major biomedical engineering schools. Now, the difference between these two, just to make sure everyone is on the same page, it really depends on what university you are attending, but in the context of A&T's biological engineering department, it really hones in on soil, water, natural resources, and how we can recapitulate environmental systems to optimize agriculture and, things like that, and biogas production and natural gases. But on the other hand, biomedical engineering at A&T is known as bioengineering. That is more so medical applications. Like I said, at the time I was a biological engineer because my research at the time reflected more closely with biological engineering. But as I'm giving this talk at the conference in Tennessee, at the end, it was a young woman, Tanel, shout out to Tanel because I still follow her on Instagram. She came up to me and she said, "You're coming to A&T?" And I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "What's your major?" And I told her biomedical engineering. And she was like, "Why are you doing biomedical engineering if your research that you just presented is biological engineering based?" And I was like, "Well, I want to cure cancer, like da 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 da." And she said, "Hold up." So she leaves, she comes back, and she has the department chair of the biological engineering department, and he basically gives me this verbal offer of, if you change your major from biomedical engineering to biological engineering, we will give you a scholarship. Just like that. Like, in a matter of minutes, I went from not having any funding for my undergraduate studies to being offered to change my major, to change it to biological engineering. So I was really hesitant because, like I said, my whole life's journey started from me wanting to cure cancer to help my grandmother and other people in African American communities that are disproportionately impacted by hormone-dependent cancer types. And so before I could turn it down, he says, "Well, how about this? Because bioengineering or biomedical engineering at North Carolina A&T State University is in the same department as biological engineering and also the chemical engineering department. Those three majors are in the same department at A&T. He said, if you join our major for your first year and decide you don't like it and you want to pursue biomedical engineering after, it's the same electives or introduction courses in your freshman year, so you can easily make that switch and change your major in your second year." So when he said that, I'm like, oh, so basically free money and I can still do the major I want to do. That's what I'm going to do. And so that was really a game changer because now I no longer was studying biomedical engineering. Now I'm studying biological engineering. And so once I got to A&T, I fell in love. I fell in love with not just biological engineering as an industry, but the people at my HBCU. I'm a proud HBCU grad. HBCU stands for Historically Black College and University, and North Carolina A&T State University, the illustrious North Carolina A&T State University, is the #1 producer of Black engineers, and it is a very prestigious program and very rigorous engineering program, I might add. And so, because I loved the biological engineering department, I decided not to change my major back to biomedical engineering, and I decided that I was going to instead add applied mathematics as a double major after my first semester. Now, how I got into mathematics is, should I go into that?
What?
Why I chose the math major?
Yeah.
Okay. So I chose to do the math major as a second major because I have always loved math, but the rigor of the math courses at A&T was very jarring for me when I first came. And this was almost like an identity crisis, because I went from high school and not really having to study often, not really having to, put much thought into preparing for tests. And for the first time ever, I struggled. I remember the first calculus test I took at A&T, I got a 70, and I cried. I cried the entire walk home. Shout out to Brene for consoling me. But it really was like a light bulb that went off, that it was like, okay, this is going to require a little bit extra work. You're going to have to work for this. And by the end of that semester, I had put in so many hours. I had formed study groups. I had went to my teacher's office hours. I had, really developed a routine around overcoming this big barrier that seemed so big at the beginning, to eventually at the end getting an A- in the class. And it was like a dopamine hit, right? And I asked my calculus teacher at the time, who ended up being my mathematics advisor, Dr. Barbara Tankersley, shout out to Dr. Tankersley, if she would be my advisor. And from then on, I was a double major. So I ended up double majoring and earning my 2 degrees from North Carolina A&T in biological engineering and mathematics. So to go back to how I got back into the biomedical space, I always said that since I decided to stay in biological engineering, that I was just going to have to definitely do biomedical engineering as a graduate degree. So I graduated in the middle of the pandemic. Literally, we were ushered home and we had no graduation. We had to do our formal graduation in 2021. But nonetheless, as I was applying for graduate schools, I was really looking for a program that would really bet on me, because you see, I was going from being a biological engineering and mathematics major to becoming a biomedical engineering. And while some may say that it's very similar, it's really not, especially when I came to USC. It's such a stark learning curve, I would say. And that's the thing that I also tell people about earning a PhD. A graduate degree, or just academia and education in general, is meant to open doors of opportunity, to widen your scope of opportunity. And so one of the reasons why I encourage people to get a PhD is because it can really expand your horizons in terms of what skill sets you have. And you don't have to do the same degree that you did in your undergraduate degrees. And I also want to note that I went immediately from undergraduate to the PhD program. That's another misconception that a lot of people hear about earning a STEM PhD, is that you have to have a master's before you can get a PhD, which is not true at all for STEM PhDs, not social science PhDs, but STEM, so math, engineering, or biology, chemistry. Now, this is not to say that earning a master's can't be helpful. A lot of people that I know who pursue the master's before they go into PhDs do that because they don't know if they want to commit to whatever their PhD topic is. However, that wasn't my concern. I wasn't really worried about that because I knew I was going to do biomedical engineering. I had to return to my first love of how I even got introduced to science, but also I was very strategic about choosing the lab. Now, this is a #1 piece of advice that I give everyone who is interested in pursuing a PhD, a STEM PhD. Choose the lab. Do not choose the school. This is the main delineation between how you pursue a degree in undergrad and how you pursue a degree on the PhD level. Your lab, or your PI, I should say, PI stands for principal investigator, is the person who is going to advocate for your doctorate degree in the end. And so this person is someone you're going to be tethered to for the next 4, 5, sometimes 6+ years. So you want to have a mutualistic relationship. Like you want to enjoy this person because you are going to be codependent in a lot of ways. You're helping them and they're helping you. And so it can be even more mentally draining when you are kind of stuck to a situation that is not supportive of your goals. So I didn't mean to go off on that tangent, but the point is, I was very strategic about choosing a lab in biomedical engineering that did not make me super niche in one area. What I mean by that is I'm a computational biologist. So while my PhD is in biomedical engineering, what I do on a day-to-day is develop in silico models that recapitulate biological phenomena. Specifically, I'm interested in building these models of hormone-dependent cancer types, such as prostate cancer and eventually breast cancer. I'm really interested in those cancer types specifically because, as we know and what we've seen in the literature, those tend to disproportionately impact African American communities, like my grandmother and also my uncle and my paternal grandmother. So my models are really all-encompassing, but the great thing about my work is that I'm a coder at the end of the day. I'm a software engineer at the end of the day, which means that these skills can translate over different types of biological applications and even outside of biomedical engineering. So when I hear people say that they don't want to pursue a PhD because they don't want to become overly qualified, I think that really just boils down to the work that you're doing and the work that you want to do or see yourself doing long term, and whether it complements that or, I guess, limits that, if that makes sense. So now we're at USC and I'm starting my PhD at the University of Southern California, which I first moved to Los Angeles in July of 2021. And now 5 years later, well, almost 5 years later, 4 years and some change later, here we are with the Melanated PhD podcast. And I'm so excited to launch this podcast. This has been something that's been brewing for a long time now. But the goal of this podcast is really to do a lot of what I've already done in the first half of this discussion, which is to bridge the gap between the Black diaspora, because we know the diaspora is all encompassing, and science, academia, and advocacy, and kind of answer a lot of these questions. One of the things that I felt that I was really lacking when I first started my PhD journey was like-minded community, but also community like me, community or persons like myself that understood how coming from a marginalized background can be an additional stressor, right? The PhD in itself is a very layered challenge. And then when you tackle on top of that being young, gifted, and Black, and a woman, it can be really, really hard. So I hope that this space is just that, a safe space for networking to ensue. I hope that this is a space where we can have real, raw conversations. And I hope that this is a space where you can learn something. Even if you're not interested in getting a PhD, I want you to know that you can still listen in and you are just as intellectually welcome, okay? Because I don't want this to be like an elitist thing. Like, even though it's called Melanated PhD, education is education, and if you're a learner, I think we're all students at heart, and if you want to tap into that, this is the place for you. We're going to have guests, very special guests. Actually, next week's episode is going to be a very special guest, and I look forward to engaging with you all. Make sure you're following the Melanated PhD. It's not the. Make sure you're following melanated.phd on Instagram, MELANATED.PhD on Instagram. Make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel so we can get to 1,000 subscribers so that I can start making money, because y'all know this student life is not not for the faint of heart, y'all. Financially, it's been hard. But we'll talk about that on another episode. And also make sure you are subscribed on Apple Podcasts. Is that the name of it? Apple Podcasts? Spotify Podcasts. Basically everywhere where you can hear a podcast, that's where we're going to be. And I'm looking forward to the beautiful things that are going to come out of this podcast. Once again, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.